They didn't love you. They loved how you made them feel. And the moment you saw through them, they couldn't let go. Why do narcissists obsess over empaths? Carl Jung believed the answer lies deep in the unconscious, in the shadows we refuse to face, and the mirrors we desperately need to feel real. If you've ever wondered why someone who claimed to love you became obsessed with controlling you, if you've questioned why you kept attracting people who drained your very soul, if you've ever felt like you were losing yourself in someone else's emotional chaos, stay with me. This may explain every toxic relationship you've ever endured. Let's start with what we're really talking about. An empath isn't just someone who feels deeply, though they do. An empath is someone who absorbs the emotions of others like a sponge absorbs water. They feel your pain as if it were their own. They see your potential when you can't see it yourself. They give their energy freely, often until there's nothing left. A narcissist, on the other hand, is someone who has constructed an elaborate false self to hide from unbearable inner emptiness. They need constant validation, admiration, and emotional supply from others to feel real. But here's what most people miss. They're not just selfish, they're terrified. Think about it. Maybe you've had that friend who always needed to be the center of attention, who turned every conversation back to themselves, or that lover who showered you with affection one day, then made you feel invisible the next. They weren't just inconsiderate. They were using you to regulate their own emotional world. Jung understood something profound about human psychology. He said we're attracted to people who reflect our disowned parts, the aspects of ourselves we've rejected or lost. The empath and narcissist aren't just opposites. They're two sides of the same wounded coin. Have you ever wondered why you keep attracting people who drain you? The answer might surprise you. Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But what happens when one person is desperately searching for their lost self, and the other person embodies everything they secretly wish they could be?" The empath reflects the narcissist's ideal self. You were kind when they had forgotten how to be kind. You were emotionally open when they had built walls so high they couldn't see over them. You were innocent when they had become cynical. You were genuine when they had become a performance. This creates obsession, not love. Obsession, because you weren't just a person to them. You were a mirror to the parts of themselves they lost along the way. Every time they looked at you, they saw who they could have been, who they desperately wanted to be, who they were before the world taught them that vulnerability was weakness. And that's why they couldn't let you go. Losing you wasn't just losing a relationship, it was losing their reflection of hope. Here's what's really happening in the narcissist's unconscious mind. They depend on external reflection to feel real. Without someone mirroring back their worth, they dissolve into that terrifying emptiness they've spent their entire life running from. You became their mirror, their therapist, their emotional caretaker, and eventually their enemy. Because empaths do something narcissists can't tolerate. You grow. You learn. You start to see through the performance. When you begin to set boundaries, when you start to pull away, when you stop reflecting back their false self, they spiral. But not out of love, out of identity crisis. They're not mourning you. They're mourning the version of themselves they saw through your eyes. Jung said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." The narcissist's obsession with you isn't about wanting you back. It's about avoiding the mirror of their own emptiness. But what about you? Why did you stay? Why did you keep giving to someone who never seemed to give back? That's what we need to understand next, because the answer reveals something profound about your own psychology. Let's talk about you for a moment. If you're an empath who's been caught in this cycle, there's something you need to understand about your own psychology. This isn't about blame. It's about awareness. Most empaths grew up in homes where love was conditional. Maybe you learned early that your worth was tied to how well you could soothe other people's emotions. Maybe you discovered that being needed felt safer than being wanted. Maybe you became so skilled at reading other people's emotional states that you forgot how to read your own. Jung would call this the wounded healer archetype, like Chiron in Greek mythology, who could heal others but never himself. The need to fix others is often tied to not knowing how to heal the wounded parts of ourselves. You thought you were saving them, but you were really trying to save the part of you that no one ever saved. Every time you poured your energy into someone who couldn't reciprocate, You were unconsciously trying to prove that love could heal anything, including the wounds you've been carrying since childhood. The narcissist sensed this. They could feel your deep need to be needed, and they used it. But here's what happens when the empath finally reaches their breaking point. When you stop giving, when you stop reflecting, when you stop being available for their emotional chaos, they experience what psychologists call narcissistic collapse. Imagine a person who has spent their entire adult life avoiding their own reflection suddenly being forced to look in the mirror. The empath was their buffer against reality. Without you, they have to face the void they've been running from. This is when the obsession really begins. The stalking, the love bombing, the hoovering, that desperate attempt to suck you back into their orbit. They'll promise to change. They'll apologize with tears in their eyes. They'll become the person you always wanted them to be, for exactly as long as it takes to get you back. But here's what you need to understand. They don't miss you. They miss the version of themselves they saw through your eyes. They don't want you back because they love you. They want you back because without you, they disappear. So what now? Is there any escape from this cycle? Can you break free from this pattern that seems to follow you from relationship to relationship? If you're an empath who's been caught in this cycle, the first thing you need to understand is this. You are not responsible for healing what someone refuses to face. Jung wrote about a process called individuation, the journey of becoming whole by integrating all parts of ourselves, including the shadow. For empaths, this means learning to honor your own emotional needs, not just everyone else's. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty. Walking away isn't failure. Choosing to heal yourself instead of trying to heal others isn't selfishness. It's self-preservation. The pattern will keep repeating until you learn to love yourself with the same intensity you've been loving others, until you learn to give yourself the compassion you've been giving to people who couldn't reciprocate, until you learn that your worth isn't tied to how useful you are to someone else's emotional world. This isn't about becoming cold or closed off. It's about becoming discerning. It's about learning the difference between healthy empathy and emotional codependency. But what if the narcissist wanted to change? What if they were genuinely committed to healing? Let's look at what that would actually mean, because understanding this might help you recognize the difference between real change and another performance. This is perhaps the most important question, and Jung's psychology gives us a sobering answer. True healing for a narcissist would require shadow work, the radical self-awareness that comes from facing the parts of yourself you've spent a lifetime avoiding. It would mean surrendering the false self completely. It would mean sitting with the unbearable emptiness they've been running from. It would mean feeling the full weight of the pain they've caused others, without deflecting or justifying or making themselves the victim. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." For a narcissist, this means descending into the very void they've structured their entire personality to avoid. Most narcissists will never do this work, not because they're evil, but because the psychological cost feels like death. They would rather maintain the false self and continue hurting others than face the terror of their own emptiness. This doesn't mean they're beyond redemption. It means that their healing journey is not your responsibility. You cannot love someone into wholeness. You cannot sacrifice yourself on the altar of their potential. Let me leave you with this truth, and I want you to really hear it. They didn't love you. They needed you to love them, because they couldn't love themselves. But you are not a mirror for someone else's broken self. You are not a healing project. You are not responsible for reflecting back anyone's worth. You are whole. You were always whole. The capacity for love that you've been pouring into others, that belongs to you first. The compassion you've been giving so freely, you deserve that same compassion. The empath's journey isn't about learning to love less. It's about learning to love yourself enough to choose relationships that honor your worth, not exploit it. Jung believed that our greatest wounds often become our greatest gifts. Your sensitivity, your capacity for empathy, your ability to see the good in others, these aren't weaknesses to be fixed. They're strengths to be protected. If you've lived this story, if you've recognized yourself in these patterns, I want you to know that sharing your truth could help someone else see theirs. Leave a comment below. Your story matters. Your healing matters. You matter. The cycle can be broken. The pattern can be changed. And it starts with you.